Chapter 3. In the short time Mac had been in her apartment, the air outside had grown thicker with a choking smoke, and her lungs tightened. The intensity of noise had amplified too. Wailing sirens competed with blaring car alarms. People were no longer hushed and frantic, but loud and belligerent. "Can you believe they bombed O'Hare?" Mackenzie said. "They what?" Jake's eyes widened above his face mask. The red and blue flashing lights of a police vehicle parked on the block over caught their attention. An officer was shouting from a loudspeaker for civilians to stay indoors. "When did they start calling us civilians?" Mackenzie glared at the cop. "It sounds like we're in a war zone." "Look around, Mac. We are. Why aren't we seeing anyone who's sick?" "I don't know." Jake pulled her backpack from her and shouldered it himself. "Which way to the drugstore?" It was only a short walk to the nearest shopping strip, but they'd barely started out before Mackenzie was limping. She'd washed her feet and applied Band-Aids, but the blisters from trekking half the way home in her 3-inch Fendi slingbacks were worse than the time she'd worn new heels clubbing until dawn. The friction as she walked was excruciating. Jake noticed and shortened his strides to accommodate her slower pace. "I'm guessing you won't be wearing those heels again?" "Nope. Couldn't even if I wanted to. I dropped them and ran when the shooting started. Those people just started falling over, like it was some kind of game. And the sound of a gun is so much louder than it is in the movies. And then people started screaming." She choked. "I just can't believe it was real, that it happened." Jake pulled her tighter against his side as she fought back the tears burning in her throat. "I'm glad Chloe sent you," she admitted. "I would have come for you even without Chloe," he said roughly. "I'll always come for you, Mac." Unlike my jerk of a boyfriend, there was something in the way Jake was looking at her, eyes serious over the top of his mask, that had Mackenzie's stomach doing a funny little twist. There was no time to think as they came abreast of the small supermarket, and Jake tugged her against the wall to avoid being rammed by an exiting shopping cart, piled high and steered by a wild-eyed man in a business suit. A woman with a red-faced, screaming baby strapped to her front, her cart also loaded to the brim, followed him. Jake caught her eye. "Think they know something we don't?" "They're just panic buying. Remember whenever there's a severe storm warning in Sanford? The whole town mobs the grocery store, thinking they'll never get the chance to buy food again," she said. "We'll probably have to stay inside for a week, 2 at the most, until they contain the virus. Still, it can't hurt to grab some supplies. With the way traffic is, it's going to take a lot longer to get home. We'll need food." It was on the tip of her tongue to reply that while Sanford may be his home, it sure as hell wasn't hers. But his mention of supplies stopped her. Hadn't that been what Richard Drammel told her to do? "Yeah, okay, and the drugstore is 2 down. It shouldn't take long." "Holy shit," Jake breathed as they walked through the automatic front doors of the supermarket, reflexively pulling Mackenzie closer. Recoiling from the utter pandemonium, Mackenzie stepped backwards. It was like they'd entered an alternate universe, where instead of neat shelves and orderly lines, people were arguing and jostling in lines that snaked back into ravaged aisles. Customers were actually running, sweeping products indiscriminately into their carts. 2 harried women staffed the checkouts where a fight had just broken out. "What do you mean, cash only?" "I don't have any cash," yelled an elderly man brandishing a bank card at the cashier, whose bangs were matted to her forehead with sweat. "I'm sorry, sir. Really I am. But our system just went down. I can only accept cash payment," she said, holding up beseeching hands. As she spoke, the overhead lights flickered and several people screamed in fright. "Cynthia, it's time to get the hell out of here," Mackenzie heard the other cashier say. "We don't get paid enough to deal with this." In the space of a second, the tense atmosphere flashed from frantic uncertainty to dangerous hostility. Another flicker of the lights and chaos reigned. Abandoning the semi-organized lines, shoppers, fiercely protective of their carts, charged for the exit. Two men were trading blows, a box of bottled water on the ground at their feet, and a teenage boy who'd just entered the store was knocked to the ground and trampled. Jesus Christ! Jake lunged forward to help the boy to his feet, dragging him to where Mackenzie was cowering against a display of fresh flowers. Are you okay? Fuck you. Get your hands off me, said the boy, snatching his arm from Jake's grip and dashing away. Dry-mouthed, Mackenzie couldn't get her body to move. She knew the longer she stayed frozen, the less likely they were to find anything worth salvaging on the shelves. The need for haste pulsed through the air, and everyone was breathing it and reacting accordingly. But her? Nope. The utter unreality of people being shot in front of her earlier in the day had been so surreal, she still couldn't quite grasp that her world had altered irrevocably, and now people were literally going mad, grabbing anything and everything from the supermarket shelves before barreling out without paying. Oh God, she blurted, I've just thought about the airport. Before, I was thinking about the structure of the buildings getting bombed. But the people, imagine how many people were trapped there. It makes me feel sick. You can't think about it now. We need to get some food and get the hell out of here, Jake said with grim determination. He grabbed a shopping basket and thrust it at her, taking one for himself. We stick together, okay? Let's take it one aisle at a time. You look at the shelves on the right, I'll look at the left. We want fresh food because most people are bypassing that in favor of the packaged, long-lasting stuff, and we can get that back in Sanford. Mackenzie stuck a hand in the back pocket of Jake's jeans, staying close behind his broad back as they jogged to the fresh produce section. The safety she felt being shielded by him was comforting, and she had a moment of marveling at how Chloe's little brother suddenly seemed years older and more grown-up than she was. There was no sign of the freckle-faced, scrappy kid who used to torment her with frogs. Taking a handful of carrots, she had a brief, bizarre moment of imagining she was on one of those reality television shows where you had 60 seconds to grab as much as you could from the supermarket shelves, and whoever had the most expensive cart at the end won. And then a woman shoulder-checked her, reaching for the last loaf of fresh bread. This was more The Walking Dead than supermarket sweep. Mackenzie gave herself a mental shake. She needed to get her head in the game, or they were going hungry. With renewed focus, she darted and dodged between the other shoppers, blistered feet forgotten, snatching at products until her basket was full. Good job, let's get out of here, Jake said, his own basket overflowing. Should we at least leave some money? She asked, feeling an ingrained guilt at leaving without paying. I love that you're worried about that, but no, we need to get your asthma inhalers and go. Exiting the store, Mackenzie immediately turned right, heading for the drugstore, only to have pain rocket up her arm as the basket was wrenched from the crook of her elbow. Stumbling, she shrieked, apples spilling onto the ground from the impact. The man in the hoodie didn't even pause, just took off running with her hard-won basket of food. What the fuck? Yelled Jake, pushing his own basket at Mackenzie and taking off after the thief. Jake, stop! Don't leave me. If he heard her, he didn't stop. Clutching Jake's shopping basket to her chest, she watched helplessly as he charged away. Not taking her eyes from his retreating figure, she backed slowly against the front wall of the supermarket, suddenly very conscious of the fact she was holding a precious commodity in a volatile environment. A woman scooped up the fallen apples and didn't even glance her way. Mac had the distinct sudden knowledge she was not safe. The intense instinct to run away as fast as she could had her heart beating double time. What if the guy had a gun? What if he'd snatched her backpack instead? Not that he'd have much use for the designer ballet flats she'd packed. God, what had she packed? Even with her advanced knowledge, she hadn't been taking the situation seriously enough. She really should have spent the extra 10 minutes searching for her passport. And tampons took up hardly any space. Why hadn't she packed more of those? If the world really was going to shit, and she was now realizing that was more than a distinct possibility. Then shouldn't she have packed practical, helpful things? A tent? Matches? What the hell else did those apocalypse preppers have in their bug-out bags? And where did one purchase a tent, anyway? And where the hell was Jake? Nearby, a mob of young men, boys, really, used a trash can to smash the front windows of an electrical store, hooting and hollering as they forced their way inside. Really? Upgrading their television was a priority? The speed with which civilization was disintegrating was terrifying. A splinter group of the original mob turned to approach the supermarket, and Mackenzie's legs started moving of their own accord. There was no way she was staying there, like a sitting duck. Walking quickly, she headed for the drugstore, hoping that Mr. Zhang was still open amid all this madness. Turned out she should have added gun to the mental list of things she wished she'd packed.